to put an end to a crime that continues to claim victims at this very moment, just 70 kilometers away from here.
Thank you very much, אורלי ודפנה. תודה רבה, אורלי ודפנה. אנחנו עכשיו נעבור לכמה דוברים מבצלם ורופאים לזכויות אדם ישראל, שיציגו את הדוחות שכתבנו ואת המסקנות שלנו. We'll now have several speakers from both of our organizations, B'Tselem and Physicians for Human Rights Israel, who will present our reports and our conclusions. We'll start with Yuli Novak, the Executive Director of B'Tselem, and then Dr. Guy Shalev, the Executive Director of Physicians for Human Rights Israel. Then we will have Karim Jubran, the Director of B'Tselem's Field Research Department, and Asil Aburas, the Director of the Occupied Territories Department in Physicians for Human Rights. I'd like to welcome now Yuli Novak, the Director of B'Tselem. Yuli will speak first in Hebrew and will then continue in English. Please, Yuli.
Thank you. Can you hear me? את הדוח שאנחנו מפרסמים היום לא האמנו שנכתוב. אבל בחודשים האחרונים אנחנו עדים למציאות שלא הותירה לנו ברירה אלא להכיר באמת. ישראל מבצעת ג'נוסייד בפלסטינים ברצועת עזה. הדוח שאנחנו בבצלם כתבנו מציג עובדות, נתונים ועדויות על האופן שבו ישראל פועלת בצורה שיטתית, מתואמת ומכוונת להרס הפלסטינים בעזה כקבוצה. על כך הצהירו נציגי הציבור הישראלים אין ספור פעמים, כך קורה בפועל ברצועה, וזוהי בדיוק ההגדרה של ג'נוסייד. התקפה מתואמת מתוך כוונה להרוס קבוצה ככזו. מזה 22 חודשים שאנחנו שומעים הצהרות מפורשות של ההנהגה הישראלית ושל מפקדי הצבא, שאומרים בדיוק מה הם מתכוונים לעשות. להרעיב, לחסל, לשטח את עזה, מקום שבו מבחינתם אין אנשים חפים מפשע. ואז הם שלחו את הצבא הישראלי לעשות בדיוק את מה שהם הבטיחו. כך, מזה 22 חודשים, אנחנו עדים להרג אזרחים בהיקף חסר תקדים, להרעבה מכוונת, להכירה המונית בכפייה, ולהרס מוחלט של תשתיות שמאפשרות קיום אנושי או חברתי. תושבי עזה, עקורים, מופצצים, מורעבים, נותרו מופשטים לחלוטין מאנושיותם ומזכויותיהם. החלק הראשון של הדוח שלנו מתאר בדיוק את זה, את הפרקטיקות שבאמצעותן מתבצע הג'נוסייד והתוצאות האיומות שלהן בשטח. בחלק השני של הדוח אנחנו מתארים מהם התנאים שאפשרו את הפיכתו של המשטר הישראלי למשטר ג'נוסיידלי. לאורך ההיסטוריה מרבית העמים שביצעו ג'נוסייד לא הבינו בזמן אמת את המשמעות של המעשים שלהם. לכל ג'נוסייד בהיסטוריה הייתה הצדקה מבחינת מבצעיו. היגיון של הגנה עצמית מפני סכנה קיומית, של מלחמת אין ברירה, או טענה שהקורבנות הביאו את זה על עצמם. במקרים רבים של ג'נוסייד לאורך ההיסטוריה ניתן גם לסמן אירוע מניע או טריגר לג'נוסייד. המתקפה האיומה והנפשעת של חמאס וארגונים אחרים ב7 באוקטובר, שעוררה בקרב הציבור הישראלי וגם אצל כולנו כאן כאב ופחד בלתי נתפסים, הייתה אירוע מניע שכזה. אסור ואי אפשר להעמיד בזוועתיות של מתקפת חמאס על עוטף עזה באותו יום. הייתה זו התקפה נפשעת שכוונה ברובה נגד אזרחים ושכללה אין ספור פשעים חמורים שהדעת לא יכולה לסבול. אבל למרות שה7 באוקטובר היה כוח מניע משמעותי, נדרשו תנאים נוספים שיאפשרו את הג'נוסייד. תהליכים עמוקים של דה-הומניזציה של הפלסטינים, בעיקר ברצועת עזה, אבל לא רק, קידום אידיאולוגיות של כיבוש שטחים, של עליונות יהודית, של דיכוי עם אחר, אלו תהליכים שנמשכו שנים רבות ושהפכו את החברה הישראלית לכזו שמסוגלת למחוק את אנושיותם של בני אדם ולאבד כל אמפתיה או מחויבות מוסרית כלפיהם. זהו שילוב הנסיבות האיומות שהוביל אותנו למציאות שאנחנו רואים היום. עשרות שנים של חיים תחת משטר של הפרדה ופחד, בשילוב עם הטראומה הקולקטיבית של ה7 באוקטובר, בתקופה שבה עומדת בשלטון הממשלה הימנית הקיצונית ביותר שהייתה כאן מאז ומעולם. כל אלו יחד יצרו את התנאים להשמדה המכוונת של עם אחר. זוהי קריאה לעזרה, אך גם קריאת אזהרה. בעזה המצב מחמיר עם כל יום שעובר. ההפצצות ממשיכות, ילדים ממשיכים למות ברעב. אנשים נורים למוות כשהם מנסים להשיג מזון, או מתים בגלל היעדר טיפול רפואי. ובאותו זמן ניצב גם חשש ממשי לחיי הפלסטינים בגדה המערבית. בגדה המערבית אנחנו עדים לאלימות בהיקפים חסרי תקדים כלפי פלסטינים, ולזליגה של הפרקטיקות שבהן נוקט המשטר הישראלי בעזה. זה לא מפתיע. המשטר הוא אותו משטר, הצבא הוא אותו צבא, ולפלסטינים שחיים כאן אין שום מנגנון מקומי או בינלאומי שמגן עליהם. לכן אנחנו מחויבים להצביע על כך ולהזהיר. כל טריגר קטן יכול לגרום לג'נוסייד להתרחב גם ליתר האזורים שנמצאים תחת שליטה ישראלית. אני אסיים בדברים הבאים. לדוח שכתבנו קראנו הג'נוסייד שלנו, כי זה מה שהוא. ג'נוסייד שנעשה באנשים שחיים כאן על ידי האנשים שחיים כאן. כדי לכתוב את הדוח הזה נדרשנו, ישראלים ופלסטינים, להתבונן במציאות הזאת באופן משותף, מנקודת המבט של בני האדם שחיים על האדמה הזאת. ביחד אנחנו מעידים עכשיו מולכם על המציאות כפי שהיא, כמגיני זכויות אדם וכפלסטינים וישראלים שחיים בין הירדן והים. מדינת ישראל מבצעת ג'נוסייד ברצועת עזה, ומול העובדה הזאת, מול ג'נוסייד, חובה להשמיע קול ולהתנגד. הקהילה הבינלאומית לא רק כשלה בחובתה לעצור את הזוועות, אלא גם חולקת אחריות לאור התמיכה שהיא מעניקה לישראל, שמאפשרת לה ליישם את מדיניות ההרס. אנחנו קוראים לפעולה דחופה של הקהילה הבינלאומית, של החברה הישראלית ושל כל אדם שמקשיב לנו עכשיו. ג'נוסייד במהותו הוא התקפה על האנושיות עצמה, וככזה הוא תמיד מעמיד אותנו בפני השאלה, מה זה אומר להיות אנושי? התשובה בימים אלו היא שלהיות אנושי זה לעשות כל מה שאפשר כדי לעצור את הג'נוסייד. תודה. I'll start in English now. The report we are publishing today is one we never imagined we would have to write. But in recent months, we have been witnessing a reality that has left us no choice but to acknowledge the truth. Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. The report written by us at B'Tselem presents facts, data, and testimonies about how Israel is acting in a deliberate, coordinated, and systematic way to destroy the Palestinians in Gaza, in an attack that aimed at the entire group as such. This has been declared countless times by Israeli officials. This is what is happening on the ground, and this is precisely the definition of genocide. For the past 22 months, we have heard clear statements from the Israeli leadership and military commanders saying precisely what they intend to do: to starve, destroy, and flatten Gaza, a place where no one is considered innocent in their eyes. And then they sent the military in to do just that, exactly as they promised. So for the past 22 months, we have witnessed unprecedented levels of civilian killings, of deliberate starvation, forced mass displacement, and the total destruction of most infrastructure necessary for human and social existence. The people of Gaza have been displaced, bombed, and starved, left completely stripped of their humanity and rights. The first part of our report described exactly that, the practices through which the genocide is being carried out and their devastating consequences on the ground. The second part of the report, in the second part of the report, we describe the conditions that made it possible for the Israeli regime to become a regime that commits genocide. Throughout history, most societies that committed genocide didn't understand at the time the meaning of what they are doing. Throughout history, most societies that committed genocide did not understand at the time the meaning of what they were doing. Every genocide in history has had a justification, at least in the eyes of those who committed it. A story of self-defense in the face of existential threat, of a war of no choice, or of victims who had brought it on themselves. In many historical cases of genocide, we can identify a triggering event. The horrific and criminal Hamas-led attack on October 7th was such an event. It caused unbelievable pain and fear for Israelis, including us here. We must not and cannot downplay the horror of this attack. It was assault directed mostly at civilians that included countless of grave crimes. Yet, although October 7th was a significant catalyst, other conditions were required in order for the genocide to become possible. Deep processes of dehumanizing of Palestinians, especially in Gaza, the promotion of ideologies of occupation, of Jewish supremacy, of oppression, all these have shaped Israeli society into one capable of erasing people's humanity and losing all empathy or moral obligation towards them. This is a dreadful combination of circumstances that brought us to the reality we are witnessing today. Decades of life under a regime built on separation and fear, together with a collective trauma of October 7th, at the time when the most extreme right-wing government in the history of Israel is in power. Together, this created the conditions for a deliberate destruction of the Palestinian people in Gaza. This is a call for help, but also a warning. In Gaza, the situation worsens with each passing day. The bombings continue, children keep dying of starvation, people are being shot to death while trying to get food, or die due to lack of medical aid. At the same time, there is also a very real danger to the lives of Palestinians across all areas under Israeli control. In the West Bank, we are witnessing violence on an unprecedented scale and a spillover of the same practices Israel is using in Gaza. This comes as no surprise. The regime is the same regime, the army is the same army, and there is no mechanism, either local or international, to offer protection to Palestinians. That's why we are compelled to state this clearly and issue a clear warning. Any small trigger could lead the genocide to expand to other parts of the area under Israeli regime. I will end with this. We call this report our genocide because that's what it is. A genocide committed against people who live here by the people who live here. In order to write this report, we, Israelis and Palestinians, had to look at reality together through the shared perspective of the human beings who live on this land. Together, we stand before you now to bear witness to this reality. As human rights defenders, as Israelis and Palestinians who live between the river and the sea. The state of Israel is committing genocide in the Gaza Strip. And in the face of this fact, in the face of genocide, our duty is to struggle to stop it. The international community has not only failed in its duty to stop the atrocities, but also share responsibility by providing support that enables Israel acts of destruction. We call for an urgent action from international community from the Israeli society, and from every person who's listening to us. Genocide, at its core, is an assault on humanity itself. And as such, it forces us to ask, what does it mean to be human? The answer these days must come in action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yuli. We will now hear from Karim Jubran, the director of B'Tselem's Field Research Department. Please, Karim.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Karim Jubran. I'm a Palestinian. I live in East Jerusalem. I have lived my whole life under the Israeli apartheid regime and occupation, with no citizenship rights. I have worked in B'Tselem for 21 years, and I am director of the field research. For 21 years, I have received reports and testimonies about crimes committed by the Israeli occupation all over the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Violence, humiliation, killings. I thought I had seen everything. But what we are seeing in Gaza now is something we have never seen before. I am afraid that if it doesn't stop now, things will get even worse. I am already a grandfather, and I always know my grandchildren would face a hard future here. But now I am afraid that we'll have no future at all. It is as simple as that. When Israel bombed Gaza in 2008 and killed more than 1,000 Palestinians, people were shocked. In the 2014, Israel killed more than 2,000 Palestinians in Gaza. In 2018, during the Great March of Return, Israel placed snipers who shot participants with live ammunition and killed over 230 people, including children, journalists, and medicists. We watched all this with horror, and we saw that no one was held accountable. Already, then we understood that for the Israeli system, Palestinian lives mean nothing. Still, deep inside, we didn't believe we would see the day that Israel would destroy all Gaza. Now we are seeing it happen in a clear, systematic, and planned way. For years, the international community doesn't almost done nothing to stop Israeli violence, the occupation, and apartheid. The lack of action is now allowing the genocide to happen. World leaders, especially in the United States and Europe, that are not taking real steps to stop it, are sharing responsibility in the horrors. The report we wrote is based on testimonies, data, and investigations. The report shows a terrible picture: mass killing, deliberate destruction of infrastructure and living conditions, total destruction of the social fabric of schools, universities, hospitals, mass arrests, abuse of prisoners, hunger, forced displacement. At the moment, no one can truly understand the size of the catastrophe. Every day, we learn about new horrors. Since October 7, at least 58,000 people have been killed, which is about 3% of the population of Gaza. But the current estimate is that this number is much higher. More than 2,200 families have been completely erased. 93% of the population of Gaza is suffering severe food and security. Of those, 244,000 is what's called a catastrophic hunger. The fifth and most severe level. Over the last few days, there was been a dramatic increase in the number of people dying from starvation, and the situation is only getting worse. Israel has also added the ethnic cleansing of Gaza to the official goals of the war. In the report, we analyze how all this is direct result of policy openly declared by Israeli leaders and military commanders. That leads us to clear conclusion. Israel is working in a deliberate, coordinated way to destroy Palestinian society in Gaza. That is the definition of genocide. You must understand what it means that the Israeli regime is committing genocide. It means we are in a new phase. We need to understand what this means for everyone in the region. It means that for the Israeli regime, killing, starving, and destroying is an acceptable way to ensure Jewish supremacy. That fact that that affects all Palestinians, not just those in Gaza. At B'Tselem, we have also documented a sharp rise in Israeli violence in the West Bank. Israel is doing everything to break the spirit of the Palestinian people, using checkpoints, arrests, and lockdowns on whole cities. We are seeing more airstrikes and demolition of neighborhoods in West Bank cities. Tens of thousands of people have already been displaced by the army. Settlers have driven out 38 Palestinian communities from their homes with full backing from the state and the army. Dozens of other communities are in immediate danger. Forced mass displacement in the West Bank is happening right now. Anyone who doesn't understand Israel is committing genocide in Gaza is choosing to look away. And anyone who thinks that genocide will stay only in Gaza is also closing their eyes. Powerful forces within the leadership of Israel have declared that they are preparing to annex the West Bank. For them, the fate of Jenin is the same as the fate of Jabalia. They don't want to see Palestinians here. In our report, we warn that appropriate trigger can bring the genocide to Jenin and Nablus, Hebron. Every Palestinian grows up with stories of the Nakba of 1948. Today we were watching our worst nightmares come true. I want to say something about the name we choose for the report, our genocide. In this darkness, the fact that Palestinians and Israelis at B'Tselem are working together, resisting together, fighting together, gives a glimmer of hope. We are all paying a price. First of all, Palestinians in Gaza, and also in the West Bank and inside Israel, are paying a heavy price. But I appreciate the courage of my Jewish colleagues who are paying a social and personal price for speaking the truth and standing up for humanistic values. We will not give up. This is our homeland. We will stay and struggle for our freedom. When genocide is happening, every person in the world must ask themselves, am I standing by, or am I doing everything I can to stop it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karim. We will now hear from Asil Aburas, the Director of the Occupied Territories Department in Physicians for Human Rights, Israel. Please, Asil.
Khulud found out, can you hear me? Khulud found out she was pregnant 1 month before the war began. Then the bombing started, and her family was displaced again and again, walking for hours with no access to care. That is what Khulud told us in an interview. We continued through the war, knowing hospitals were full of the dead, no anesthesia, no care for me or for the baby. I was terrified that I would give birth and bleed to death because there was no one to help us. We walked constantly, exhausted and afraid something terrible would happen to me or the baby. The hospital was far away from where we were. There were no checkups, no monitoring, no support. Khulud gave birth while displaced, far from any functioning hospital, afraid every step of the way. Today, there are 50,000 pregnant women in Gaza. Next month, 5,500 are expected to give birth, 1,400 by C-section. None will deliver in safe, equipped hospitals. Many, like Khulud, will give birth in overcrowded tents, without anesthesia, without clean water, without trained staff. Since the war began, care has collapsed. Birth rates have dropped by 41%. 1 in 5 babies is born preterm or underweight. 92% of infants aged 6 months to 2 years are not getting enough to eat. This happened because Israel blocked aid, denied care, destroyed hospitals, along every life-sustaining support. For nearly 2 years, Palestinians, international volunteers, and humanitarian organizations have raised the alarm. Israeli army is targeting hospitals, cutting off fuel and aid, issuing evacuation orders, and bombing indiscriminately, forcing entire communities to flee. Doctors are killed and unlawfully detained and tortured. It is destroying health infrastructure systematically. This is not chaos. This is a strategy. The report Physicians for Human Rights Israel are publishing today shows a systematic attack on health. It is a deliberate, cumulative dismantling of Gaza's health system, and with it, its people's very ability to survive. As Israel bombed and besieged hospitals, cut off fuel to hospitals in northern Gaza in the beginning of the war, patients and displaced families were forced to flee south, overwhelming already fragile, barely functioning facilities in Deir el-Balah, Khan Yunis, and Rafah. The collapse of care in one area triggered breakdowns everywhere. When Al-Shifa collapsed in the beginning of the war, Al-Nasser was flooded with patients. When Al-Nasser was dismantled, the European hospital began to break down. With each assault, Israel destroyed more hospitals, killed and detained more staff members, and blocked more essential services. But this was not just a war on hospitals. It is a war on the conditions of life that make survival even possible. Israel destroyed water infrastructure, bakeries, farmland, and blocked or weaponized aid. This triggered severe malnutrition spreading through the Strip, especially among children. With hospitals bombed, equipment destroyed, and medications depleted, Long-term care is now virtually impossible. Dialysis, maternal care, cancer treatment, diabetes management, all have collapsed. Life expectancy in Gaza has already dropped by nearly 35 years. Even if Israel ends its military offensive today, the damage has been done to Gaza's health system will continue to kill through starvation, through infection, through chronic disease. Deaths that could be prevented will continue for years. This is not a temporary crisis. It is a deliberate removal of a population's ability to survive. This is not a collateral damage. This is not a side effect of the war. This is a systematic creation of unlivable conditions. It is the denial of survivability. It is a genocide, and it's happening right in front of our eyes, right now. Governments and international bodies must act now. Compel Israel to cease fire, protect and rebuild Gaza's health systems, reinstate UN, international, and Palestinian support mechanism, allow free and safe passage for humanitarian aid, and ensure the safety of healthcare workers. These actions are critical and must be taken immediately.
Thank you very much, Asil. We will now hear from Dr. Guy Shalev, the Executive Director of Physicians for Human Rights Israel. Please, Guy.
Thank you. As we sit here, starving, exhausted, and injured Palestinian civilians are dying. They are dying because of deliberate Israeli policies. Policies that the humanitarian community has warned about for nearly 2 years, to no avail. Inaction by governments and the resulting impunity have brought us to this horrific moment. From the start, what we are witnessing is an attack on the people of Gaza and their ability to survive. As early as October 13, 2023, just 5 days after the horrendous Hamas-led massacre in Israel's south, the Israeli military issued evacuation orders for 22 hospitals in Gaza City and the northern part of the Strip. Where were the thousands of patients and wounded supposed to go? How could they be evacuated while the entire Strip was under heavy bombardment? What medical services would be available for the 1 million residents under evacuation orders? Every person, and certainly health professionals, should have asked these questions, even as the pain from the October 7th attack burned in our bodies. The evacuation orders were the opening shot of an unprecedented attack on Gaza's healthcare system. From the start, Israel portrayed hospitals as legitimate military targets, justifying attacks that would never be tolerated anywhere in the world. Israel claimed Hamas used the hospitals for military purposes, but these claims were unverified and bore no relation to the comprehensive, absolute destruction of an entire system. Over the course of 22 months, Israel systematically dismantled Gaza's health and life-sustaining systems. As assaults continued, medical care collapsed in a cascading sequence, each phase worsening the damage of the last one. Israel's total siege on Gaza deepened the collapse. Patients were barred from being evacuated. Border crossings were closed. Israel almost entirely blocked humanitarian aid. We documented these developments extensively, and based on a careful legal analysis of the facts, we state with a heavy heart, this is a genocide. Today, Physicians for Human Rights Israel is publishing a report detailing Israel's actions in Gaza. We focus on Article 2C of the Genocide Convention, the deliberate infliction of conditions of life calculated to bring about the group's destruction. This legal definition acknowledges that genocide can occur through systemic and infrastructural means, not only through mass killings. We show how Israel's actions have led to the destruction of the conditions necessary for the survival of Palestinians in Gaza. Systematic destruction of the healthcare system, denial of access to food, blocking of medical evacuations, and using humanitarian aid to advance military targets all indicate a clear pattern of conduct, a pattern that reveals intent. Amid this horror, our colleagues and friends, the healthcare workers of Gaza, are acting heroically to save lives, while they themselves are under direct attack. More than 1,500 healthcare workers have already been killed. More than 300 have been detained. It is our duty to support them, ensure their protection, and insist on accountability and justice. Silence in the face of genocide is not an option. We want to stress, confronting genocide is not only the responsibility of legal and political institutions. Confronting it demands urgent action from the global health community. As health professionals and humanitarian actors, we call for global solidarity to defend life, health, and dignity. The destruction of Gaza's health system must end now. We demand the immediate cessation of the attack on Gaza. Lift all restrictions blocking access to life-saving medical care, food, water, humanitarian aid, and essential health infrastructure. Stop the killing. Stop the starvation. Stop the genocide.
Thank you very much, Guy. We will now open for questions. So please indicate you'd like to ask a question, and we will try and facilitate this. We'll start with you. And please first also introduce yourself and your media outlet, your name and your media outlet. Thank you.
Thank you for this.
It's working. It's working.
Yeah. It's Habib Salman from CNN. You mentioned, Karim, that you paid a personal price, you and your colleagues, while preparing this report. Can you talk about the most difficult challenges that you had while preparing those reports?
We might try and take maybe 3 questions, and then we'll do answers. So, second person. Okay, please. So, just name yourself.
Matthew Doran from ABC Australia. Ms. Novak, you mentioned that the catalyst event for what we've seen in Gaza was, of course, the October 7 attacks. Clearly, what you are outlining in this report shows that there must have been some sort of predisposition within the Israeli military, the Israeli government, to go down this path anyway, regardless of that attack. Could you talk to what you believe that is? And Dr. Shalev, you've spoken about the need for the medical community also to speak up about what is happening here. There has been a significant amount of exposure given to foreign doctors going into Gaza, speaking of their experiences, the horrors that they have witnessed. Why do you think their experiences aren't necessarily being listened to, or are they being ignored?
Okay, and maybe a third speaker, a third question, if anyone.
Let's start with this.
Okay, so let's start with this.
So when I say about the high price which we pay as the two sides of the society here, or the team of B'Tselem, we are Palestinians and we are Israelis. First of all, the Palestinians, when we talk about our colleagues in Gaza, in order to tell their story, and the story of our colleagues in Gaza, it's the story of everybody in Gaza, living in Gaza. They removed more than 6 times from place to other place to other place. They live the hunger and the starvation for a long time since they left the Gaza Strip, but they left their relatives there. They left their families there. They left their friends there. One of our field researchers, she lost his her brother and his wife, and his daughter, and still their bodies under the rubble of the building. Other member of our field researchers, he lost 26 family members in one of bombings of Gaza. That's the daily life of everybody in Gaza, and there is no family in Gaza that doesn't been beaten directly and lose someone or some relative or some friend. When we talk about us as Palestinians living in East Jerusalem and the West Bank, and even inside the Green Line, we live the discrimination in daily basis. We are under the apartheid regime. We are with this rights. We see that every day. The checkpoints in the West Bank, the lack of freedom of movement for the people, the closures, the house demolitions. We talk about more than 2,000 demolitions carrying out since the 7th of October until this day in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Out of them, about 740 houses. When we talk about our colleagues, in the Israeli colleagues, in order to speak very in clear language and to call the things in its names, in such a society, in such an atmosphere of genocide and incitement against any other call criticize what happened in Gaza, he pay a price. And I know many of our colleagues, they pay a very high price in their society, in their close circles even, but still they're struggling for human rights. They're still struggling for the justice. They're still struggling with us hand by hand in order to defend the victims and to be the voice of the victims. And that's what we will continue doing, and we are ready to pay any price as a team in B'Tselem, Palestinians and Israelis working together and moving forward together in order to defend human rights.
Thank you, Karim. Maybe Yuli and then Guy.
So we see October 7th, as I said, as a trigger, as an event that had that was a force that moved the Israeli system towards this genocidal phase. But concerning your question, I have no idea what would have happened if October 7 didn't happen. Just like I have no idea how reality would have come into what it is if something was different. So I can only talk about what we do know that happened. And in that sense, what we do know is first that October 7th was real. It was a real attack that was oriented mostly towards civilians. It was a criminal attack. And personally, I can say it was one of the most, or probably the most frightening day of my life. What it created, and that's also something we know, in Israel society, is a sincere feeling of existential threat. The second thing we know is that feeling, that traumatic, collective trauma, was taken advantage by a government that is not, at least some of it, and part of the people who stand at the top of this government are not seeing what happens now in Gaza as something bad that needs to be stopped, or even as a kind of side outcome of something. They see what happened in Gaza as a miracle. And we have a minister who said that, right? So it's not, for them, that's the opportunity to fulfill a vision that they had way, way before. So that is the second thing we know. And the third thing we know, and that goes to your question, is that genocide doesn't start out of thin air. There are conditions that are not, doesn't necessarily have to develop into genocide. And again, we know that because we learned history. because we know how genocide as a political and sociological phenomena is happening. And there are always conditions that enables it. And in that sense, what we saw and what we went through and where we grew up in, and the elements of separation, of immunity from hurting Palestinians, of ethnic cleansing, demographic engineering, militarism, these are all elements that kind of created the base for something to happen once the other circumstances are coming into place. I have to say that it is important for us to explain this also in the report because of the simple understanding that in order to fight a political system, in order to struggle it, in order to oppose it, you have to understand it. And part of our contribution to this struggle against the Israeli genocide is our ability as Israelis and Palestinians to explain it, both from the point of view of the victims, but also from the point of view or looking at the system that is committing it.
Thank you. Guy, please.
Thank you for this question. First of all, I don't think they're ignored. We've seen a lot of doctors coming from all over the world, volunteering, putting themselves at immense risk, coming into Gaza, caring for people under attack. And we've seen their testimonies being heard in the world. Unfortunately, it seems that they are not heard by the right people that can actually change the course of the government's policies. It seems that people are listening to these doctors, seeing the images from Gaza, and going to the streets in many, many places in the world. But governments continue their support of Israel, whether in silence or in direct support. And we are hoping that people who are guided by the right conscience will be able to influence their governments in order to bring change and stop this genocide. And also I want to say something about doctors around the world. Because doctors around the world also see these images and also listen to their colleagues, Palestinian and foreign, coming into Gaza and telling the stories of the Gazan healthcare system. And we are also hearing their voices, but also we are seeing that they're not necessarily represented by their national medical associations. And we've heard silence from national medical associations, and we are hoping to hear them more. And the reason is because the attack on the Gazan healthcare system, on health, on infrastructure, on doctors, and on medical workers is an attack on the profession, is an attack on the very idea of care, of people caring for each other. And we think that doctors around the world and associations, medical associations, have to raise their voices. I would want Daphne to add something as a doctor.
I want to say that to my colleagues in Gaza, and I hope they'll get to hear this one day, they have shown unbelievable bravery. They have stood by their patients in the most unbelievable conditions, risking their own lives. More than 1,580 medical workers were killed by the army. More than 300 were arrested and were held in Israeli incarceration facilities in subhuman conditions. We all seen all over the world Dr. Ara Najjar holding her dead babies. I'm asking my international colleagues to show an ounce of this bravery and stand up for your professional ethics and do something. Stand by our colleagues. Stand in solidarity with them as individuals and as medical associations.
Thank you very much. We have a couple more minutes for a couple of questions, and then we can also have interviews. So if you want to ask a question now, we will come to you. Please just introduce your name and the outlet you're working for, and and we'll take two. Yeah, please.
From Arabic TV. You've talked about the international steps taken, and one of those steps is taken by by South Africa or Holocaust itself to cooperate? Will you be willing to do that as towards the organizations?
And also, yeah.
My name is Nader from BBC News. How do you imagine this, what you're announcing today and the reports you've released, will be received in Israel more widely? And do you think it will reach a more receptive, aware audience than it might have done were it to have been released perhaps last year, earlier in the war?
Okay. And we have two more questions from there, and I think we'll finish. So maybe let's take these, and then we'll get to you.
Okay, I want to answer the first question about ISIS, and then somebody else. Okay, so I want to say something in general about our work and the conditions we are working under. You know, we are, all of us here are part of Israeli-based organizations with a staff of Israelis and Palestinians from around the area, from the area between the river and the sea. We are working in an increasingly oppressive environment. Karim talked about it before. We need to think a lot about every word that comes out from our mouth in order to keep our responsibility towards our team members, first and foremost, both Palestinians and Israelis, and to keep our ability of us as human rights organizations and our colleagues, again, Palestinians and Israelis, to be able to continue to work. We got to publish these reports after a long process of research, analyzing the facts, but also about asking ourselves what is our role in the face of genocide. And what we are coming with today is to say whatever we can in order to kind of join or support the global effort, which Guy talked about, of human beings around the world that are standing up and opposing it and trying to do whatever they can to demand their governments to do more. There are governments around the world which are doing more than others, and there are governments who are completely supporting of this. And those who supported it is part of what enabled this genocide to happen. I will stop here.
Thank you. Guy, please.
Regarding the question on how these reports might be accepted in Israeli society, so as Israel-based organization, I think it's first and foremost our responsibility towards our societies to tell the truth and say that the truth means something, and to be able to speak in our own language with our friends, families, communities, and bring the evidence that we collected from the ground and from using other organizations' data, especially as we know that, as you said before, some of these reports that were published earlier in the war were accepted as biased against Israel or maybe reflecting anti-Semitism. So I think we have larger responsibility to stand behind the truth even when the truth is being denied. And I think this is another aspect that is important to understand about genocide, and B'Tselem has been talking about that. Genocide happens when there's support, when there's public support. And public support for atrocities such as those we see now in Gaza happen when there is denialism. When people are in a state of denial of what's going on, what's being done in their name. And it is these reports that we publish today are aiming at breaking these walls of denial and allowing people to acknowledge what's going on and that they have to rise up and stop it.
Thank you. We'll have two more questions, and then we will move on to individual interviews. So please, Nurit first, and I don't know your name. So,
Hi, I'm Jerry Sheen, the Washington Post. I
terms of its recognition of the realities on the ground in Gaza in the last, just even in the last couple of weeks, for example, we've seen that there has been a bit more discussion in even sort of, primetime news channels about the starvation and things like that. Do you sense any change at all recently?
נורית? שלי בעברית כמובן,
זה בעברית?
כן, כן, בטח.
פשוט דיברתם על ההרס והמוות מן הסתם בעזה, נורית מ-Times of Israel, אבל גם על העובדה שצריך כוונה בעצם כדי לומר שמדובר בג'נוסייד. אז רציתי לדעת האם אפילו בתהליך המחקר הפנימי יש התייחסות למקרים אחרים של ג'נוסייד, זאת אומרת, האם נעשתה איזושהי ניסיון להשוות לאירועים אחרים, רחוקים או יותר קרובים כדי לקבוע את זה בסופו של דבר.
I'll just briefly refer to the question on changes in Israeli society. Yes, we've been seeing a change in the past few weeks, and I think that a lot is attributed to the reality being much worse on the ground in Gaza, and the ability to deny it, the ability to not see it, I think is just not so much possible for many of Israelis watching the images coming out from Gaza. We always say better late than ever, and everyone who is reckoning with what has been going on in the past almost 2 years and is willing to join us calling to stop it, doing whatever they can to stop it, is something that we of course support and we want to encourage. But also the past needs to be accounted for. We're not letting that go, I would say. Maybe Asil wants to address intent.
So regarding to intent, we have covered that in our report, in where we're showing, our report specifically is taking the destruction of the healthcare system and looking at the pattern as a way that we're looking at intent. Other reports, for example, Amnesty that was published in this last December 2024, and other reports have really looked at incitement, for example, by Israeli politicians and decision makers as a proof of intent, and we have covered that as well in our report, but we looked at more, especially after 22 months of war, on proving intent by looking at the pattern of conduct, showing how there is a book that Israel is going by now of how destroying hospital. We can look at the pattern here of every hospital that has been destroyed, collapsed. There's 1, 2, 3, there's literally a book that is being followed. Every hospital, it's almost the same. Issuing evacuation order, cutting fuel and aid around the hospital, targeting the doctors and the medical staff, bombarding the hospital, evacuating patients, and then basically the hospital is ceasing to be functional. That is happened to 33, almost most of the hospitals. From 36 hospitals, 33 have been damaged. And this is the pattern that we looked at, and we can show intent like that. We've also showed we've also mentioned in our report also the Bosnia genocide, and we have mentioned that in terms of intent. Also in our process where we were learning, we also learned, and we have researched and learned about other genocides. Yeah.
Thank you. So Yuli, and then I think we'll finish and move on to...
נורית, את מעדיפה שידבר בעברית? שזה לא משנה לך? אוקיי. לא, אם את מקליטה אז אפשר גם לעשות מאמץ בשבילך. Okay, so I just want to say something quick about intent, and I know where you're asking it from. The legal discussion around genocide is usually very much focused on the element of intent in it, and you probably all know it. As much as this legal discussion is super important and is critical in order to bring perpetrators into justice, what we know from history is that the legal system, definitely the international legal system, works not in the time frame that is needed in order to stop a genocide. Usually it gets to its conclusion way before, after the damage has already been done. And So when we are looking at intent, I think we need to also look at it not as lawyers, but just as people with eyes and hearts and mind. And look at what happened here. In the first days of the attack, the highest political level in Israel, including the Prime Minister himself, the Minister of Defense, the President of Israel, stood out and told all of us, told the world and also their soldiers their intent. They marked the entire population of Gaza as responsible for Hamas attack, right? That was the exact words of our president. It's an entire nation there that is responsible. They called Gazans human animals. They called them Amalek. We all heard it. Now, that marks a clear intention of targeting civilians and directing the attack towards the civilian population. Now, we can say, okay, they just said it. But then we heard it from commanders in the army, right, from generals. And then we heard the soldiers on the ground saying exactly the same thing, singing that they are going to take down Amalek, singing that there are no innocent people, there are no uninvolved people, singing and talking and shouting about going to destroy Gaza and flatten Gaza. So that's the second. And then third, we saw the results. It wasn't just talking. And fourth, our leaders also saw the results of what they said. And they had enough time, 22 months to be precise, to stop it and to correct if anybody understood them wrongly. And they didn't do that. And again, as a person with a mind and a brain, I think if anybody look for a proof that there is an intent here, that's how you get it. Thank you.
Thank you. So maybe one from you, and just identify yourself in your outlet.
With the Financial Times. Could you talk a little bit about any engagement you may have had with the Israeli government, maybe legal authorities, etc., on this accusation of genocide? And secondly, within the Israeli human rights defenders network, other NGOs, I remember when you guys released a report on the apartheid, you were joined by dozens of others. Today we see the two of you. Are we at the tip of the spear? Will more people follow? Or is there another reason why there's only two groups here today?
You will speak about the government? Okay. I'll just say again, we are now the two, as far as I know, two first Israeli-based organizations that come to this conclusion. Israel is all around. Israelis who share our values and general approach to life, which is to respect human dignity and human rights, are struggling these days. All of them. Not only human rights defenders, not only our colleagues, we see it all around. I have to say it's not the mainstream of the Israeli society today, and I say it with a lot of pain. The mainstream of Israel society today is still, as we hear it from the mainstream media on the street, is still completely holding completely this notion that everything we are doing in Gaza has a justification because of October 7th, right? But I think as the situation there on the ground is getting worse, many people, still a minority, but many Israelis are opening up and trying to understand what they see in front of their eyes. And in that sense, we see our responsibility also as kind of a way to help our society also to face a very harsh truth. And here I have to say something because it is personal. To recognize, to really fully understand that your country, your collective, is actually committing genocide, is a very hard process, mental process and personal process. Not only because it puts us in risk, in all kinds of risks. That's also true. But more than that, because it breaks something very internally, very, very basic about who we are and who we think about ourselves and who we thought we could have been. And I think many of our colleagues, just like us, are struggling at the moment, not only because of fear of sanctions, but also to fully grasp this thing that is genocide, that in its most kind of the most basic characteristic of it is that it is really incomprehensible. It's a phenomena that the mind cannot bear. And that's where we are now, and in a way we're trying to do the impossible. We're trying to portray a phenomena that is really unbearable to describe and even more unbearable to understand and then to act. But once you do, once you see it, once you cross that line, I think everything becomes very, very clear about what you need to do. And in that sense, I hope many other Israelis will follow and join this struggle to stop the genocide.
Thank you very much.
I think the question about what kind of communication we have with Israeli bodies is important, because we are now, after, frankly, 22 months of just unstoppable attempt to stop this and communicate with the different Israeli bodies in order to do that. And we know that is part of what we delineate in our report. The Israeli bodies knew all along what they're doing. We had the WHO, we had other UN bodies, we had humanitarian organizations, we had Palestinian organizations saying again and again that this is what's happening on the ground and these are the results of that. We, as an organization, already in October 20th, 2023, submitted an early petition to the High Court to stop the attack on Al-Quds Hospital. 3 weeks later, it ceased to operate. Kamal Adwan, the last remaining hospital of the northern side of Gaza, serving more than 70,000 people, was attacked 50 times. We petitioned the High Court. We wrote letters to the military, to anyone. The same day that it was finally destroyed and burned, we submitted an urgent petition, and it was denied. So we have been communicating again and again with all kind of bodies. We're communicating with Israeli medical bodies, everyone, in order to put whatever pressure that is possible. And they are not heeding to any of the warnings. And what we're seeing in the past few weeks with starvation, this is maybe the most clear example of that. Everyone, all humanitarian community, the international humanitarian community, all experts on that topic, warned that if you put a total siege on 2 million people, people will die of starvation. It takes time, and now we're seeing that. It's not something that they haven't seen ahead of time. And it's just a clear violation of anything that we might consider as human, while knowing that they are doing that.
Thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you to the media. Please feel free to come up and do individual interviews if you're in need of that. Yeah, and coordinated through our spokespeople, Shai, Ran, and Yair over there. Okay, so, and thank you everyone for coming. Of course, the embargo is now lifted and you're free to publish